Number 8, by mere truth. I don't know if you've heard of the technological singularity. Who hasn't? I've been very interested with what it's about, and basically an idea that says the rate of technological change is accelerating, and that within this century, technology, like strong AI, nanotechnology, and genetic engineering, will reach maturity. Do you think it will occur sometime in this century or at all? And if you don't think it will occur, why not? It probably will, and there will be people who understand it. You know, the one thing we haven't solved is intelligence. We don't know why we think. We don't know how we think. We don't know how we solve problems or how living things solve problems. We do know sort of how computers work, but until computers can figure out how we're better than they are, I don't think we're going to be suffering from their competition too much. If we make artificial intelligences, then we're going to understand ourselves better and enhance ourselves to keep up to speed. If we solve all these things at once, from nanotechnology to genetic engineering, we'll probably be able to keep up with the machines, so to speak. But the machines will also be more and more like us, and I think they'll also merge with us. So the singularity is, yeah, you know, the old-fashioned people may not understand what's going on, but that's true today. I mean, how many of us actually understand what happens inside of a chip, down to the quantum level? How many of us understand how a 747 flies? How many of us get into a car and really understand everything that's happening in a car? Singularity. You're in a car, that's a singularity. You don't get it. Maybe your engineer gets half of it. Maybe the designers get 3/4 of it. So I like the old Twilight Zone episode of the cowboy who ends up in the time machine in the future and just drives him crazy. All these automobiles and loud noises and everything. Well, and of course, he has to leap 150 years to make that particular shocking adjustment. Number 8, by mere truth. I don't know if you... Oh, no, just said that, okay. Number 9, by M. Wilkie. I read Slant when I was a teenager, and one idea that really struck me at the time was your presentation of biological computers. Especially amazing was that it wasn't just a bacteria soup, like DNA computing, but incorporated insects. In Slant, I had what amounted to a bacterial computer, and the way the computer worked was by solving evolutionary problems and getting a sugar reward or a food reward. I think evolution is a means of problem solving, and back when I wrote Slant, I was just edging on to the idea that I used in Vitals, that perhaps the greatest problem-solving mind in our universe, in our world, is the bacterial computer. That is, all of the bacterial genome incorporated into the biosphere, all the bacteria together in our guts, in nature, on plants, in the soil. All of that stuff really do prepare the earth for us. They are the little mothers of the world, and without them we couldn't exist. To think of them as being primitive is, I think, kind of begging the question. They're very sophisticated. That was an amazing enough concept in 1999 when I read the book. 10 years later, it still sounds too futuristic to believe. All you need to do is go into your refrigerator. If you're like me, you've probably got a lump of lettuce or cheese or something in the back. Just pull out the drawer, reach in and feel that slime. That is a bacterial brain, or a bacterial village, depending on how I think of it. It's called a biofilm. You've got that in your guts. It's all over the place. Biofilms are ways bacteria get together to form multicellular organisms. And when they do that, they develop resistance to antibiotics, and they develop resistance to predators that come after them. So it's like walling themselves up in a city, in a fortress. And I think that's a pretty good indicator that they can change their behavior and basically put on brown shoes and get a job. If that falls apart, then they can go back to being wild-type bacteria, and they don't have to join together all the time. Whereas we, as social individuals, we really are very tightly tied to our society. So think of us as being part of society. Think of bacteria as largely being a part of society, many different kinds of societies. That gives you a bigger picture of what it means to be social, to be a problem-solving organism. So it says, goes on here for a couple more points, but I think we've covered that. 10, Golem 14. What do you think are the odds for high-tech human civilizations to survive the next 500 years? What is the most likely cause for collapse? Most of my books since Slant, even before that, since Queen of Angels, have been about the fact that we have met the enemy and he is us. And I think we have a lot of ideas that go back not to the 20th century, not even to the 19th century, but back to the 3rd millennium BC. And those ideas are very, very tribal and very prejudiced and very hard to get rid of. And those are the things that are going to kill us, if anything's going to kill us. I don't think technology is something that's an enemy. I think technology is something we can misuse, but technology also includes things like wrenches and screwdrivers. So if we can use those, I think we can use technology, super technology, effectively. But we do have to know where our weaknesses are, and our weaknesses are in our tribalism. Golem says, I also have a follow-up question, just in case. If we face partial destruction, what do you think the minimum size of civilization that can keep increasing our technological and scientific knowledge? Some people made estimates in the past, back in the 1940s and 50s, that a couple 100,000 people could do all of this. But imagine if you went from having a brain the size that you have now down to a brain the size of a mouse. You might be able to find some wheat and eat, but I don't think you'd be doing advanced technology. And it's a similar thing if you reduce civilization. If you go down to Mad Max level and everybody's hunting for gasoline, they're not going to be doing theoretical physics or astronomy. I think that that'll be a limiting factor. So the size of the human civilization is an indication of, to some extent, of how much creativity we can bring to bear on the problem, simply because that many people are like that many neurons in the brain. It's interesting, at what point do you actually lose the ability to be creative? Take a look at history. As populations have increased, the pressures have increased on science and technology to find solutions for the population increase, and the theorizing about the outside universe and about our own behavior have increased commensurately. So yeah, I think that the more of us there are, the more thinking will be done, if any of us are willing to think. That's a big question sometimes. Number 11, C. Dresden. It's lots of fun to speculate how many of the emerging technologies we see around us today will impact the way people behave and interact in the future. One thing I've always appreciated about your work is that you spend time exploring the social aspect of technologies. You don't just assume people are going to exist fundamentally unchanged from the way we are now. Well, thank you. I do believe that technology changes us. Whether it changes human fundamentals or not depends on how far down the road you go. In fact, I think a New Yorker is fundamentally, in many ways, quite different from, say, someone living in sub-Saharan Africa. Just by the nature of the environment they live in, they're going to have different approaches to life. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be different psychologically or that they can't sympathize or empathize with each other. I do think those things are quite possible. Being human is, right now, a universal datum, kind of sea level that we can all understand. How much that will change in the future? Good question. Read my books and find out. At some point, for example, when dealing with AI, characters are inhuman. Let's say non-human. Worse, from the point of the narrative, they might be interacting with others in non-human ways. How do you keep such a character believable and sympathetic for the reader? In a way, you fake it, just like with aliens. Certainly in motion pictures, we give aliens basic negative or positive human attributes and then let them run with them. When we do, in writing, when I do aliens, I take a set of attributes that are emphasized, sometimes surrealistically emphasized, and let them develop in relation to their environment, their goals, etc. But as with any group of animals or human beings, you have to understand the environment, what their motivations are. Once you get their motivations, you have a good idea what the characters are going to be like. And then you can play with it kind of poetically or instinctively. And that's what good novelists do, is their characters, they play with in unexpected ways. So you can throw a wrench into the works and screw things up based upon what you started out doing and end up with something even better. Number 12, if someone was to read just one of your books, which one would you want them to read? A person who just reads one book a year is probably not going to read my books. If they're going to read just one, then go out and in November, just buy the new one. Okay? It'll be called Mariposa. Go all at once. Go to bookstores, go to Amazon.com, all 4 million of you, and buy 2 copies each. You only have to read it once, but that'll help.